Welcome to the lesson on multiplication with positive and negative numbers. We're going to study this bit first. The reason for it is that when we start looking at substitution in a couple of lessons time, you might get caught out sometimes with when we're having to multiply with negative numbers, and they don't always make it so obvious in the question. So we're just going to develop our understanding first, and then that will allow us to lead on to being able to calculate with negative numbers with confidence. Firstly, we're just going to explore a little bit to help us understand how certain rules work. We're going to start off with multiplication with negatives. When you look at the question of multiplication, if I asked you what was 3 lots of 2, your answer would be 6. Similarly here, if I asked you for what's 1 lot of minus 1, you would get minus 1. If I asked you for 2 lots of minus 1, if I had minus 1 in each hand, I'd have minus 2 in total. So what do you think would come out if I asked you what 3 lots of minus 1 would be, 4 lots of minus 1 and 5 lots of minus 1? Now, what we're going to do as a starting activity is that you'll all have a worksheet, and you would illustrate your answers on a pair of spaced out number lines, so they would look like this. All I'd like you to do is this. For the answer of the first question of what's 1 lot of minus 1 is minus 1, we're going to use the top number line to indicate the starting point. In this example, it's 1. The bottom number line would be what the answer would be after the operation has been performed, so that would be minus 1. So we draw an arrow from our start to our finish point like so. If we expand on that, we would have 2 lots of minus 1 is minus 2, so we would have a start point at 2 and we'd end at minus 2. What would be a good idea now would be to put onto your number lines what 3 lots of minus 1, 4 lots of minus 1, 5 lots of minus 1, and where you end up there. Once you've done that, think about what sort of pattern is being formed here and answer the questions at the bottom. What's 0 lots of minus 1, minus 1 lots of minus 1, etc. What do you think that those answers would be? Right, so let's just review the multiplication line. Now, we're just dealing with multiplying everything by a minus 1, because as you'll find out later, when you multiply by a minus 2 or a minus 3, it's just a question of involving the times tables. Now, if we look at what happens when we multiply a number by minus 1, we said before this that 1 goes to minus 1, and 2 times by minus 1 gives you minus 2. And then further to that, your 3 times minus 1 would give you minus 3, and so on. Okay, so you kind of see what's happening there. As the top line increases, the bottom line decreases. Now the next question is this: when you multiply anything by nothing, if you've got nothing lots of anything, clearly you've got nothing. So we have ourselves a little line here. Now what's particularly interesting here is that this line here can also act as a bit of a line of symmetry, because when you're looking at what's minus 1 lots of minus 1, you ended up with 1. When you got minus 2 times by minus 1, you would get 2. So if we were to continue that symmetry going here, this is what you would end up with. So 0, multiplying anything by 0 can act like a line of symmetry when we're talking about working with negatives. So looking at this carefully, write down what you think a rule would be for the following: by multiplying a positive number by a negative number and multiplying a negative number by another negative number. How would you sum that up in words? Okay, we're in the position now where we can actually apply the new knowledge on multiplying involving negative numbers. We've got a typical question here, and you'll find these on the GeoGebra files after this slide. Now, minus 6 times by 5, we've got a negative multiplied by a positive. So if I was actually to split out the symbols from the integers, then I've got a negative there, 6, multiplied by a positive 5. So I'm separating them out into two parts. The first part being the positive or negative symbol, and the second part being the whole number integer, okay, the positive integer. Now, if I was to actually fully separate these two out and deal with each part there, the yellow part by itself and the blue part by itself, then I can use my knowledge of what a negative times by a positive would be, and also my times table knowledge of 6 times 5. Now, looking at what these both are equal to, a negative multiplied by a positive as we found out before, and if we use minus 1 times 1 in that example, what's 1 lot of minus 1? Well, it's minus 1, so we end up with a negative. So 6 times 5 in our times table will give us 30. So when we actually want to answer the question what would minus 6 times 5 would be, then our answer would be negative 30, and that would give us our answer. Now have a go at these GeoGebra questions that you'll find attached to this web page. Now if we take question number 5 as an example, we've got negative 6 times by positive 7. Remembering that when we times a negative by a positive, what would we end up with? And then if we look at 6 times 7 as a times table part of it, and then that would give us our final answer. So if I just flick the answer on for question 5 there, you'd say it would be negative 42. So a negative times by a positive is minus, and then a 6 times 7 is 42. If you have a quick look at what question 3 shows, we've got a negative multiplied by a negative. And remember what you found out before in the earlier activity, and then you got the times table bit of 5 times 6 as in the example previously. So a negative times by a negative ends up with a positive, and 5 times by 6 leaves us with 30, so our answer would be positive 30. Have a go at the GeoGebra files now underneath until you have found that you have got this okay.